Dignity Matters.
Hello, my name is Bernie Furshpan. I'm your host of HMTV's Raised by Survivors. I'm here with a very special guest, Frieda Hoffman. How are you today?
I'm very well, Bernie. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for sharing this time with me. You're also a daughter, a child of survivors.
Correct.
Just like myself.
Correct.
And it's our upbringing was a little different than other people's upbringing. And I'm grateful that I actually grew up with both my parents because I learned a lot of amazing values from them. And I miss them terribly. They were my heroes. Where did you grow up?
I grew up, we moved to a small community in Brooklyn. Not many people have heard about it. It's the only gated community in New York City. It's at the very tip of Coney Island. It's called Seagate.
Very close to Coney Island. I mean, I used to work at Coney Island Hospital. We used to go to Coney Island and have our Nathan's hot dogs. They still have those competitions.
They do.
And do you miss living in Seagate? And what kind of memories do you have living in Seagate?
I don't miss living in Seagate because we still own the house that my parents owned when we lived there since the early 1950s. So we are in Seagate and Coney Island at least once a week, checking in on our tenants and the house. Seagate has changed a lot since I grew up there, but the community is over 100 years old, so it has changed a lot in the last 100 years.
Wow. When was the first time that you remember learning about the fact that both your parents were survivors of the Holocaust?
To be perfectly honest, I don't have a memory of learning about it, and I don't think that many, well, I'm not sure, I shouldn't say that, but I would venture to say that many second-generation people like us don't actually remember a time when they learned specifically about it. It was just a fact of life.
It was just a fact of life. And so you shared this, you had this in common with your friends who also were second generation. Obviously, your parents moved into a community where there were other survivors as well, landsmen as they called them.
Correct.
And they also had American friends. It was kind of like two circles of friends. I think my parents had the same thing. Did your parents ever watch films about the Holocaust? My parents did, and I would see them sit there and sob. And I kind of learned about the Holocaust just watching their reaction to it.
Not that I remember. I do remember the families that were refugees that lived in Seagate. I do remember the families having communal dinners and holiday dinners because, as well you know, many Holocaust survivors were the only survivors in their family. Sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, etc. did not survive. My parents were the only survivors of each of their families. They did not live in communities that would have known each other prior to the Holocaust. So my mother and father would probably have never met prior to the Holocaust. My father lived in a small Polish town called Chełm, Chelm. My mother lived in a city that changed occupiers and governments quite regularly. Now it is the capital of Lithuania. It is now called Vilnius. Mm-hmm. At the time it was called Vilna, and it was one of the largest Jewish communities in the world. It was known as the Jerusalem of Europe. Mm-hmm. There was a very large and ancient Jewish population in Vilna. So my parents did have their landsman community and their American community.
When you grew up, do you remember what kind of experiences you had growing up with survivors? that was a little different than your friends in school, perhaps. When did you realize that your parents raised you maybe a little bit different than other parents?
I realized it fairly early on because I did not have aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and my friends, except for the other second-generation children living in Seagate, most of them also did not have aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. As a matter of fact, most of them were only children because many of the survivors were on their second families, their first families having perished in the Holocaust.
What kind of food did your mom make?
I hate to say this publicly, but my mother was not much of a cook.
Yeah, mine too, but she did cook old world food, right? Because it was their comfort food.
Yes, my mother was quite young, and she was the youngest in her family. She learned to cook from, I'm assuming, her mother. She made the standard gefilte fish, chicken soup, chopped liver. She made a very unusual dish that you may or may not have heard of. Is made with the boiled knuckles of calves.
Pacha.
That's exactly right.
My mother used to make it all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Not too many people
It was
know
pretty
about
gross.
it anymore.
I got to be honest. I would open up the refrigerator door and I said, "Oh my God, is there a dead body in here?" It was horrible.
I loved it.
You loved it.
I loved it.
But it's very garlicky. It sounds like a witch's brew.
Very garlicky and easy. And I have said this many times. The cuisines of poor people all over the world tend to rely on the same types of ingredients because being the poorest people, they would inevitably get the worst cuts of whatever it was that was available. So,
but they made something out of it.
Absolutely.
They took lemons and made lemonade.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's an amazing story. Did you ever see your parents cry?
I did see my mother cry, but not about her background. More contemporary to her situation.
I saw my dad cry. You know, he lived in a forest for 3 years, and somehow he learned to man it up in certain situations, and he didn't want my brother and me to cry because he and I understand where that comes from, because I'm sure in the forest everybody told him stop crying. So, but I did see him cry when my brother and I graduated high school, and I think to him it was the fruit of his survival, and it was to him a reward.
Essentially, we and our children and our great-grandchildren and future generations are the answer to Hitler and his minions. We survived, and we will survive, and we will keep on surviving.
Absolutely. Do you still have friends that you stay in touch with from the old neighborhood?
Absolutely. I have one person that I talk to about regularly, and he's probably the only person I have that I can, not having any siblings, that I can talk about my parents and his parents when we were young, because friends usually come into your life when you're an older child, a teenager. Your siblings are really the only ones that you have a common background with, that you could discuss things about your parents. So this one individual is somebody that I talk about our families with.
Not all survivors talked about their experiences. They wanted to move on. They also didn't want to upset their children.
Correct, yes.
They wanted their children to be hopeful. They didn't want their children to lose faith in humanity about hearing stories like this. So many of them just wanted to move on. Of course, they opened up once films and documentaries came out. And they said, hey, you know, I have a story too. I want to tell my story. And they started sharing their stories with their children. But this is 40 years after the Holocaust. But the second generation, like you and me, some of us feel that it's a moral obligation to carry the torch and to pass on these stories. I do.
Absolutely.
I know you do.
Absolutely.
Tell me why you do.
My father escaped, I think, because he never spoke a word about his experience. All we knew was that when the Germans invaded, he escaped to the forest and survived that way. But the details, we don't know. I don't know. And unfortunately, in my youth, when things are always limitless, you always think there's time. And my father passed away at 69, and I never got to ask him a single thing. My mother, on the other hand, was a little bit more forthcoming and able to talk about her experience. She did a testimony for Steven Spielberg's Shoah Foundation, which I think I've only seen once. It's very difficult to watch for
It's
me.
a 6-hour-long
Yes,
film.
it is.
And it's a very powerful film. Each testimony is so moving and touching. It's hard to see the whole thing in one shot, in one sitting. Obviously, it's a very long film, but each testimony is... You have to be cold as a stone not to be moved and touched by their stories.
Absolutely. I have seen things on TV where Holocaust museums have recreated the survivors' digital photography where they can answer questions of people that are, so to speak, in the audience. And I have heard many survivor stories. It's hard to listen to a lot of these stories because I have my own demons that need to be answered.
I feel regretful that, and most people do, that we didn't ask more questions, obviously.
Yes, absolutely.
And I tell young people all the time, talk to your grandparents. Find out what your heritage is. Because when they're gone, you're going to have regrets. So find out about your past. It's really interesting to see how people managed to survive in the past. You know, it was harder than it is today. As bad as it can get sometimes today, it was worse back then. And we feel hopeful as a society, as a nation also, that the young generation will learn from these lessons. And that's why we talk about the lessons of the Holocaust as an example of how low we can descend as a humanity, as a society, that they can do much better, that they can reach higher for themselves and reach higher for society.
I think in line with what you're saying, the most important thing that we need to continue is educating and education and talking about the past, because the past doesn't just live in the past. It's frequently repeated. And we need to see where we are repeating and where we can do better. And the only way to do that is to learn what happened and not deny the existence of what actually happened. And as a second generation, I am really happy to be involved in any way that I can in educating the public about this museum and anything that has to do with the Holocaust, because by far one of the most horrible, tragic events in human history, not just Western history, in human history.
It's so true, and that's why we talk about it. But since the Holocaust, some 50 million people have been killed in genocides. And that's why we have to kind of wake up the youth of today, that they don't have to inherit this perpetual cycle of hate. They actually can say, no, we had enough. Our generation, we don't want to inherit it. It's a broken world. You broke it. We don't want to. We want to fix it. We want to live better. Because I think overall, with science and philosophy, people are getting a broader concept of what humanity really is, that we're all related and we live on this tiny little planet that we all share. Why can't we get along? We can certainly do a hell of a lot better, that's for sure. Do you have a message for young people?
My message is to educate yourself, to keep an open mind, to learn as much as you can, and not jump to conclusions.
And don't judge others that they're different. They're actually you under different circumstances.
Absolutely.
Really, that's what I tell young people. I said, I am you and you are me. We're just under different circumstances. If you grew up in my household, you be me. If I grew up in your household, I'd be you. So let's foster more empathy for other people. Try to understand.
Absolutely.
Try to understand.
A very
them.
important message.
Yeah, that's probably one of the most important messages with Holocaust and tolerance education. Is not only to tolerate people. It's more than just tolerating.
Yes.
It's really get into their soul, understand their culture.
Acceptance.
Yeah, acceptance. Understand their situations, their cultures. That this is how they were raised. They know, and it's not that they're different. They're just a variety of us. That's all.
Correct.
And learn more about it. I love to travel. My wife and I love to travel.
I was just going to bring that up.
My wife and I love to travel because we love the various cultures and the foods. Oh my God, that's all we talk about. And their contributions to society. We've also been to countries where, obviously, there's lots of countries where women have no rights and gay people are executed. So every time we come back to the good old USA, no matter how many problems we have here, it's still the greatest country because we've seen it every time we come back. We say, oh, thank God we're back home. All these freedoms and liberties, and that we should never take them for granted. We should always ensure. And I think the next generation has to make sure that the democracy and the freedoms that we have, that we enjoy here in this country, are never tampered with. And so I was born in Israel too. So I love being an Israeli. I love being an American. There's so many great opportunities in both of these countries and many other countries around the world. And I tell young people, you can do many different things. And I learned these skills from my survivor parents. So did you learn any skills from your survivor parents? Like I learned from my father, because he lived in a forest for 3 years. And if he wasn't happy here in the forest, he would go there. But he was fearless. He was fearless. He would be able to pivot and make changes in his life without being afraid. Many people hate their jobs, and they're afraid to make a change. And so that was not a problem that I had. I loved all the things I did, but there are many other things I wanted to do, and I was not afraid to literally jump in head first without any skill sets, but learning them very quickly and becoming successful because I was confident that I could do it. And I learned those skills from my dad because he survived in the forest and he had to become a problem solver. He had to solve problems all the time there. And he told me that if this doesn't work this way, work around it, go over it, go under it, go around it, figure out a solution because there's a solution for every single problem. In fact, I have more solutions than problems. And I ask people to give me problems because I have solutions.
That's a fabulous
testimony. But I learned that from my dad. I really did. What did you learn from your parents?
My father was an extremely talented individual. He was a painter. He was an artist. He was, the business that he eventually got into was general contracting.
Right.
And he was able to intuitively do anything. Electronics, anything that, and he was interested in everything. I often wonder if he had the opportunity to be more educated as a younger person. I can't even imagine what he could have accomplished. My mother, on the other hand, was quite the opposite. She was very timid. She was very afraid. And she was not able to pivot, as you put it, the way my father was. So they were really quite opposite in their outlooks. My father was never afraid to spend money on anything because apparently he felt he could always make more.
Right.
My mother, on the other hand, was the opposite. She would, I remember vividly, the days when banks would give out premiums like toasters and kitchen pots and things of that nature. My mother would go from bank to bank, opening up accounts and collecting these premiums. After she passed away and we went through her things, there were unopened boxes.
That's interesting.
Of bank premiums, like toasters.
I have similar stories, but I got to tell you, I think that we must be related somehow because the stories you tell are the stories that I tell. It's very similar. My father was very creative. Not that money was no object, but you're investing, and you're going to make more money by investing this way. You'll double it if you invest in this direction. And I learned a lot of that. A lot of the investments are on myself. to learn skills. And because I was the best investment for myself, because I had a lot of skill sets, I could do a lot of different things. So I can pivot that way, like your dad and my dad. So,
Yeah.
so it's a
I
great,
think that the ability to do that was definitely something that I regret my father didn't have more of an opportunity to explore his talents. He did what he did, and he did it very well. But I think if he could have gotten more education as a younger person, there would have been letters
yes.
before and after his name.
I could say the same for both my parents because they really had no education because they were very young. My dad turned 10 when he had to run to the forest, and he really never got much of an education after that. By the time he was 15, he ended up in Israel. There was a little education for him, not much. I don't know exactly what he did learn. But then when we moved to the United States, he had to learn a whole new language and start from scratch. But they did good by us, didn't they? They really went way overboard and bending backwards to make sure that we had as much opportunities as possible.
Yes, that was the
And for our kids too, right? Just to keep passing it along.
overriding mission for my parents was me, which could be interpreted both ways, but it was very important to my parents that I succeed, that I do well, and when I had children, more doting grandparents could not be found anywhere on earth.
Yeah, I could say the same. They really were. And they loved my kids, they loved my brother's kids, and they wanted them to succeed as well. And it didn't really matter exactly what we were doing, as long as we turned out to be good people, good parents, good husbands or wives. That's what was important to them, that we had instilled in us the values that, that they had.
That's absolutely true.
This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank
I so much appreciate you sharing your experiences with me.
I have to say this was a last-minute surprise, but Bernie, you're an excellent host.
Thank you.
You have great questions, and your talents are obviously multi-talented.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, you know, I'm using it to benefit this organization and society at large.
And they are lucky to have you.
Thank you so much.
Very lucky to have you.
And we're lucky to have you because you're part of this. And I appreciate everything you do. And I appreciate our audience who eavesdropped in this conversation today.
That would be great.
Yeah. Here on HMTV at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. I'm your host, Bernie Furshpan, of Raised by Survivors. Until next time, stay well.